So, 326 or 27 KNYO LP Fort Bragg. As promised, Ezekiel Kralin, his latest installment, or rather his latest installment that I'm up to. He's up to October in his story, but I'm lagging behind. He writes them faster than I can read them. I'm only up to February 3. At Dewitt, D-E-W-I-T-T, apostrophe S, at Dewitt's End. Ezekiel Kralin wrote, email correspondence, February 3rd, subject, I dreamt of wit, date February 3. Before I get to the dream, I want to make 2 more points about bed bugs that I neglected to include in my previous missive. One, I'm worried that Drama King Deke may decide to not even let me hug the pups because of bugs in my building, in which case I'll remind him that he's never seen one on either dog. Short hairs don't carry them. Fluffy or woolly dogs, on the other hand, can, as that is when I became aware we got bed bugs, thanks to finding one crawling on my semi-fascist neighbor down the hallway's dog Skelly, a Papillon. This was a few weeks later, after he returned from vacationing in Turkey in whatever hotel he stayed, from which a bug or two hitched a ride back to San Francisco, which was years ago, over a decade, besides which the fool is now deceased. 2. Though the good thing is, Deke is beginning to become aware of my own stress dealing with bed bugs and why I started to not have anyone visit me anymore. So he may also soon come to live with these pests intimately and learn how to make peace with them, as most San Franciscans have. I'm guessing the shelter manager lectures all new residents about bed bugs, and is one good reason they forbid bringing anything off the streets inside. But I'm sure if I give Deke doggy sweaters and sleeping bags still sealed in their original plastic wrap, he will be allowed to keep them. Pause. Deke just dropped by to collect his allowance. I guess he waited till the rain stopped out of regard for the pups, I presume, because he usually shows up bright and early, rain or shine, dogs sopping wet or dry, instead of a late afternoon, but that was before he had a roof over his noggin. He was waiting by the gate with his granny cart a few feet away, and his hound tethered to it, jumping in delight to greet me. I handed him the Chase envelope. This is $100. Exactly what I wanted, he replied with a grin, because he expected half that amount, and to his credit, never asked me. Sorry, I just flipped all the text up there, and now I've got it back. Never asked me for more than that any time during his long, drawn-out wait for the next payday. He then pointed to a lumpy, small plastic bag I held in my left hand and queried, "What's that?" "Those are 2 more doggy sweaters. They arrived this morning," I explained. "They're sealed in their original packets, so you don't have to worry about bugs." He made no comment about the bug issue, but happily accepted them, and said, "I need to go now. I just came by for the money." "Okay," I said. "God bless you and your little family." And then I added as he walked away, "I'm very impressed with how you're doing these days. It takes a lot of courage to do what you're doing, for both yourself and the dogs. Always good to reinforce whenever he does the right thing, and I know it touched his heart." He then abruptly turned around and approached me with cart and pups. "Here, you can pet the dogs while I'm in the smoke shop." So I did. Sat down right there on the concrete and swept them both up into my arms, whereby Lucky began play-biting my sleeve with loving growls, and his sister stood with front paws on my shoulder to lick my face. I pet and scritched them all over with great vigor, which they love like nobody's business, always such joyful meet-ups when it comes to the poochies. Deke returned in 2 minutes, thanked me, and took off. I called to him, "Put those new sweaters on. They fit snugly and won't slip off." Those are the gray and black plaid sweaters. I've bought for them 3 times before, so he already knows that. But since they were still sitting unopened in the cart, I thought to remind him. Then I added while he was still within earshot, "So your next payday is Thursday, 6 days from now." Just before I stuck the key into the gate, who should come up to Deke on his bike but Deke number 2, so I ran up to him and said, "Thanks for the raincoat, it's a nice one." "Raincoat?" queried Deke while waiting for the light to change. "Well, I gave you the only one I had," I replied, "so I appreciate the one he gave me. So now I'm back hovel to proceed with my dream." My dream. It was about Clarence Dewitt, a homeless friend from the 80s who I haven't seen since 1989. His friends call him Wit or the Wit, as Clarence is too wimpy a name for his roguish type. All I have to remember him by is this sketch he drew for me, and some years later he got a scanner and saved the image to my computer. See picture. Black and white felt-tip sketch of a large van with 2 doors in the back and a motorcycle securely propped against them. The drawing is actually all black, with some red highlights on the motorcycle and a caption below the drawing that says Perfect 90s. I've never dreamt of him before, by the way, but before I really get into the dream, some backstory. He lived in a box on wheels, a bread or UPS truck painted over in a rich dark shade of blue, no passenger seat, just a plastic bucket to sit on, and a white and brown shaggy dog named Wiley for his companion, same size as my Brindlekin, though if you shave off the fur, I imagine half their size. A very nice dog, always a pleasure to have him visit, as was his master, who, by the way, liked to tell me he's a Kazakh from the warrior clan. He is most handsome, sexy fusion of Western European and Asian steps with clearly epicanthic eyelids and hazel eyes more green than brown, of short stature like me, but always insisted he's much taller in spite of the obvious. I didn't care. I'm the one who got to sleep with him every night he visited, though we always slept with our clothes on, as sex was not what he sought. Wonderful company nonetheless, and we dozed barely 1 foot apart, with Wiley snuggled in between. He took me on adventures out of the city, the Berkeley shoreline, Oakland all over, and even one time as far south as Boulder Creek in Santa Cruz County. In exchange, I paid for our meals, usually at a Burger King, but sometimes at a small independent hash house like we did in B.C. Those were the days, eh, Watson? Cheap dining, cheap rent, and cheap gas. Though on many visits, he remained in the city to hook up mainly with yours truly, as well as hang out at a donut shop on Castro and 18th, which is now long gone. He'd usually park his vehicle some blocks away on a side street halfway up a tree-lined hill. But as time drifted into the 90s, hostility increased against the mobile lifestyle, so these traveling vagrants were pushed out of the city for the most part. What we have now is different. The homeless living in vehicles are trying to survive as best they can. They are not adventurers like Witt and other young drifters I knew. But he did have a dark side, much like Deke's, though unlike him. We shared many good times together and great conversations. We knew each other, like Deke and I have never known, but the last time I saw him was a day we spent in Berkeley by the wharf, and later that evening he drove me back and left the city. But I was really pissed at him for some things he did, though not worth describing now. At any rate, a few days later he gave me a call, and I lashed into him. How dare you, blah, blah, blah. I could never blah, 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 and so on, rather than listen and apologize. He hung up, and he never called me back. About 3 years later, this person who knows both of us, and he saw Witt a few years ago, who asked if I'm still living at Hotel California North, he told me he doesn't think so, that I moved on. Why did you say that? I asked with some anger. I really did think you moved. I haven't seen you in over 2 years, he explained. Besides, Witt is a vulgar person. You have no idea. He kept some things from you. Okay, I replied. Maybe it's for the best. Thanks for telling me. If I see him again, I promise to tell him you still live here. This mutual, quote, friend, by the way, was a real bump on a log. Blew into SF in the mid-'80s from Utah. Dreary vanilla type who I wished would move back to his home state. I got to know him a bit because he hanged out at the same coffee shop I used to frequent. He landed some kind of government job as an office flunky and remained in the city until he kicked the bucket a few years back. I don't even remember his name, and I don't care to. So all these years have rolled by without ever hearing from my Kazakh comrade again. Maybe it is just as well. I don't know. Sometimes when he'd return to visit me, he'd park his truck across the street late at night and yell through an electric bullhorn he installed, "Catalano, are you awake? I'm back. Catalano." This was years before I changed my surname to Kralin, which abrupt blast of noise not only made me hit the ceiling in sudden arousal, but everyone else on both sides of the street. I should also mention here that the one and only time I got on a motorcycle was with him, without helmets, on a frigid night along Highway 1 with Wiley standing up on Witt's lap, paws on the handlebars. The doggy couldn't get enough of it. It was the only time I got to hold him firmly in my arms and feel his solid butt cheeks pressed deep into my crotch. all capital letters here, for more than 20 minutes. I did not get a hard-on, by the way, due to the icy chill of the damp ocean air in mid-January and pure unrelenting fear. You know, I often muse over how some folks living on the streets may be shamans, but I tell you this, good doctor, if any homeless person's a shaman, Whit surely is. Okay, I'm done with the backstory. Now onto the dream for real. I kid you not, though I have relished teasing you with anticipation by so much delay before getting there, so bite me. He was already in my room when the dream started, and the Brindlekin were his. Not that he stole them from Deke or anything else nefarious, they just were his. I gave no thought about it. The ambiance was one of peace and joy, for he had finally returned to my world after so many years. And I guess we had already been hanging with each other for a few hours before entering my building. I don't know or remember what we talked about, but in a few minutes he announced he was going to step out for a while, and I can walk the mutts. I said, okay, then looked directly at him, where he stood in shocking radiance, smiling at me, and clothed in thick-gauge, shiny black nylon slacks and jacket with white piping. He then turned and exited through the open door, upon which I called out to him, "When should I expect you back?" "I don't know," he replied, as he disappeared around the corner and down the stairs. "An hour or two, I suppose, maybe 3. Next thing I know, I'm walking the dogs through a lovely neighborhood similar to San Francisco's inner Sunset, though with even more leafy trees and flowers. One moment Flacco and Lucky were alongside me in their happy, sniffy way. The next moment they had disappeared to parts unknown. I was only mildly upset, spent barely 1 minute looking for them, then figured they'd already be back in my room, so I hopped on a rail car to return home. Though while seated in the car, my concern for the hounds grew, and I was scared what Whit might say if the dogs weren't there. Right then I woke up, rolled over, and thought, phew, so glad that was just a dream. Only because of the dogs, not because Whit returned to me, which was wonderful. Did he perhaps pass away that night, and his spirit paid me a visit? Or is he truly a shaman with telepathic ability, letting me know we'll see each other again soon? Or maybe since both him and Deke are shamans, they're having some fun at my expense. I could go on conjecturing all sorts of interpretations, including the dream means nothing, though I doubt it, but I do wonder, why so much happiness in our reunion, only to have it marred by the vanishing canines? As I meditate upon this further, perhaps I'll come up with a clear answer. Anyway, have a glorious evening, Morticia. It was just so sweet to see Whit again, even if it was only a dream.